Welcome back, friends. I hope you're well. Last time we discussed, or rather, we wondered how President Donald Trump is going to find his way out of the corner he painted himself in. It seems like he is still having difficulty getting out of the trap he made for himself because his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, at a, during an interview to the media, had said something interesting. He said President Trump is surprised that Tehran has not surrendered. The word he used is that the president is frustrated that Tehran has not surrendered in the face of the mighty armada that he has marshaled against Iran. And he was referring to the two aircraft carriers, one in the Mediterranean, one in the Arabian Sea. And of course, by estimates, by many military analysts, something like half the US Air Force has been deployed in that theater. But as Witkoff said, Trump is frustrated that Tehran has not surrendered. And then what is one supposed to do? And that is something that brings out the sheer impetuous nature of this adventure by President Trump. Although it was planned, as we discussed earlier, many years ago, but the launching of the aggression was in Trump's hand, and he chose this moment to launch. What it shows, or rather what Steve Witkoff's confusion shows, is that they launched this military adventure without any real plan on how to proceed. I think it was assumed by the Trump administration that looking at the aircraft carriers and the jets flying over, the Tehran would simply give in. But what has happened is exactly the opposite. Tehran had simply refused to give in. In fact, the second round of negotiations that are now taking place, the third round that are now taking place in Geneva, reportedly, Tehran has insisted not only will it not accept Trump's terms, but that if any agreement is reached, it must include the lifting of all economic sanctions against Iran. Now, this puts Trump and his advisors in a quandary. Do they go ahead with launching a military assault for which all assets are ready, the equipment, the machinery, and the soldiers? Or do they finally admit that they cannot impose their will on Iran and back off? Now, the second option is something no imperialist will consider very easily. They did so in Vietnam, they did so in Iraq, and also in Afghanistan, where they had to withdraw in defeat. And that stage still hasn't been reached in the case of Iran. But it may have come close to that, because a few days ago, the Wall Street Journal reported that the toilets in the aircraft carrier Gerald T. Ford are blocked rather badly, and the sailors are having difficulty relieving themselves on board. Now, their discomfort and their disappointment and the fact that they are more disgruntled has been explained away by Wall Street Journal that the sailors have been at sea for more than a year. and therefore they're yearning to go back to their homes and to their families. And that, they say, is the reason for an apparently low morale among the sailors. That may be true, that may be part of the truth. But we would argue that there's something else going on. You may recollect that when Trump kidnapped President of Venezuela, he said it's all about oil. And Rubio said the same thing. We are going in there for the resources as well as to prevent external, meaning China and Russia, getting a foothold. And Trump said something very similar when he demanded control of Greenland. It was about resources. So, for the first time in our memory, for the first time, the US administration has dropped the lofty pretense of bringing democracy, freedom, liberating the people from oppressive regimes, and so on and so forth. Now they have openly said this is about oil and resources, which means it is for the benefit of the oligarchs in Washington, the big multinational companies that are going to benefit from those resources. Now, this, I have a feeling, has sent a rather disturbing message to the rank and file soldiers and sailors. Because now they are being told that they have to fight and sacrifice so that the rich can get richer. Not for any lofty moral cause, like in anti communism in Vietnam, about anti Islam in Afghanistan, or even when they say it in Afghanistan, they are trying to liberate or rather emancipate the women of Afghanistan. This time around, all those pretenses have been dropped. And Trump has openly said this is about resources and it's about economic interests, and which in the end means the interests of the rich. And I feel it is this message that has been the cause of some discomfort and even worry among the sailors on Gerald T. Ford. Because although the Wall Street Journal did not mention why the toilets were blocked on that aircraft carrier, there are other reports that are trickling in outside the mainstream news outlets. Other news that is trickling in that the sailors actually, at least not all, perhaps some of them, had pushed in cloth, t-shirts into the toilet bowls and deliberately blocked the toilets in order to force Gerald T. Ford to slow down or at best to call into some other port where the sailors can then take a break. Now, if this is true, that the sailors willingly sabotage the ship by stuffing cloth into the toilet bowls and blocking the sewage, to me, that amounts to a mutiny. A mutiny that is no doubt a passive mutiny, but a deliberate mutiny where they are expressing their discontent at the policies of this government, which now openly says these wars are about profit, not about saving the world, not about making peace. It's about profit. And it is this factor that has been, I think, behind the crisis on Gerald T. Ford, and also, therefore, will affect other cadre, other soldiers and sailors who are being deployed there. Now, how did Trump assume that by sending this military armada, that Tehran would collapse, would fold, and come to Trump on their bended knees? I think taking into account that actually Trump is not the one who makes the plans, he is the one who merely executes it. The strategic planners in Washington have, I think, been used for very long to this business of gunboat diplomacy. And this gunboat diplomacy assumes if they simply parade these enormous, aggressive, and frightening machines off the coast of Iran, that Iran will say, my God, we can't cope with this, let us fall on our knees and beg for forgiveness. This the British used to do in India and Sri Lanka, sailing their frigates off the coast every time there was a rising anti-British sentiment. But this has a long history, and it goes back to Hawaii. Hawaii, the kingdom of Hawaii, was occupied and annexed by the United States more than a century ago. It is said that it was the US Marines were the cutting edge of the force that occupied and annexed Hawaii. It is said there could be some amount of legend in this. It is said that the US Navy moved in their frigates or warships into the harbor in Hawaii, trained the guns on the palace on the hill, and told the queen that she had two choices, either die or surrender. And since she did not have an army or a navy, she had no choice and she surrendered. And Hawaii was then colonized by the United States and absorbed into the federal structure. But that doesn't end there. As we know in life, people's desire to be free are very deep and strong. Even though this was done more than a century ago, today in Hawaii, there is a national sovereignty movement, a movement that demands that greater rights to the native Hawaiians and, at best, total independence from the United States. What is interesting is that this has come up, or rather has gained traction in the news when the similar operation is being done against Iran today. And it'll be interesting to see how the operations in Iran are going to blow back into the Hawaiian experience and how far the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, they don't call it a liberation movement, they call it a sovereignty movement, which they emphasize is aimed at self-determination and, if possible, total independence. We are going to watch this as it unfolds, and we'll bring you up to date the next time. Thank you for being with us, and remember to subscribe and to click the like button. Thank you and goodbye.